Okay, moving along. I'm gonna, what I've done since last time is I have adjusted some things. This one was too high. I felt like I got a little bit more, went a little bit more slower about trying to measure these and ended up shifting some. And that wasn't such a scary proposition because I really hadn't, the only detail I was still, level of detail I was at was just sort of the outline or the bones, the structure, the basic structure of these shelves. And there wasn't anything else in there that was going to get messed up and had taken a long time, so long a time that I may have balked at trying to fix it. Anyways, what I'm gonna and just adjusted various things. And one thing I'm is a conscious choice is that I'm just sort of thickening them up. I decided I wanted these shelves to be a little thicker than the reference photograph. And that's something that's quite doable if you just sort of understand how to adjust structures and adjust the basics of any box shape, form, and perspective. So what I'm going to do first here is talk about a little bit about the pipes sticking through the shelves, holding them together, and assuming that each pipe goes through the middle of the shelf. So, for example, if I'm actually looking down at the shelf, that the pipe is going something like that. But this is in the middle like this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some projective geometry. It's sort of just these construction lines, a little bit more about construction lines and finding the center of a rectangle, whether it's in perspective or not. So, and you may be quite familiar with this, but if so, a refresher. So for any rectangle, to help understand proportions and to be able to identify where one point is on one side and the corresponding point on the other side, we do this, we sketch in these imaginary lines to help us pinpoint certain things. And the first one, I'm going to rotate, is the diagonal to diagonal crisscross, corner to corner diagonals. Which fortunately has will intersect exactly in the middle. So there's ways of sort of estimating the middle, and granted, this once again is all human, so that's not exactly the middle, I know, but it's pretty darn close. And we can also use that information to help sort of accurately divide this rectangle into two equal halves, left and right, and two equal halves, top and bottom. So this is a technique that will be extremely helpful to get very comfortable with this, and either with just getting good at drawing straight lines, or just having a real handy straight edge that you can pull this off. And one of the reasons, well, just real quick, additionally, it's another way to quickly figure out where the halfway point of the halfway points are. So now I can pretty easily divide this equally into fourths with vertical dividers, as well as fourths with horizontal dividers going through where these guys. And it gets sort of intimidating at first if you've never sort of done this, but these are extremely helpful to just, like I said, to kind of get comfortable with. Mostly because this is also true with rectangles that are in perspective. And in particular, these rectangles that we're looking at, they are in one point perspective, where the edges are facing straight to us and the further edges are exactly further away, but still side to side. That will end up appearing as some sort of trapezoid, like this, for example. And you can tell for this one, kind of on purpose, that this angle is more extreme than this angle. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but the tilt is a little bit, this is steeper. But anyways, hopefully it's not too confusing to you to remind you that one way of finding where the excuse me, where the horizon for something like this particular setup would be, and vanishing point, I can find by just extending these lines in this direction to make a capital letter A I've had fun with, that works for upside down capital A's and right facing and left facing. Maybe I'll do more on that. So, and I know I'm drawing over my lovely sample there, but hopefully that makes sense. I don't need to necessarily do this. Just wanted to reinforce that. But as far as the crisscross goes, I'm going to do the same thing with this rectangle. That's in perspective. So I know that that's where the perspective middle center is, sort of the actual center of this object. And as you hopefully realize by now that because it's in perspective and things are appearing shorter, smaller, less wide as they get further away, or just sort of shrinking in general, that now this point, the distance from here to here is smaller than the distance from here to here. And that's kind of one of the most important things for understanding perspective. And this is true. Before I do a different example, we've also been talking about finding midpoints to help split things in half. But the other, and even more accurate, if you can find this this crisscross as well as an accurate vanishing point, is to just create that line that goes from the vanishing point through this intersected diagonal line. And as you can tell, that's not sort of exactly straight, but it is going to be, at this point, sort of the exact average between that angle and in the middle. Real briefly, the same. This is a horizontal plane we're looking at, and the same is true for vertical planes. This would be sort of a left-facing capital A with a baseline or something. I'm not sure. I'll work on what I'm going to call that. But I could extend those to find out where eye level is. It is interesting because if this whole thing is rotating, you might think that that's what that intersect is going to tell me, and that is actually an additional aspect of perspective. This line that goes through here. Save that one for later because the horizon is always this horizontal line going through here. So if I wanted to find the perspective center of this particular vertical rectangle that's rotated away from me and in perspective, I would do this crisscross again. That would help me find this middle. And again, from the vanishing point through that middle and extending will help me divide this rectangle evenly into 4 sections. And that's going to come in handy all sorts of ways, and in helping to place windows and doors and really kind of eyeballs and ears and stuff. Anyways, so that is the basics of that. And if the rectangle is getting too skinny to really kind of jam in this crisscross and all those lines, I'm using my drawing knowledge to know that if I did all that, that I can be sure that it will be at least a little bit closer to this edge, the midline to this edge than this edge. So as you can see, I've sort of jotted in, sketched in where these midlines would be when this rectangle, this trapezoid, is getting really quite squished. So I want to make sure that when I'm thinking about placing, all this was to sort of understand placing these pipes. And I think that's a lot of blabbing for one video. So what I'm going to do is really just kind of mark where I'm going to decide that maybe I'll actually look at my reference. They're pretty far out. There's a little bit of space. And I'm just going to make these points where they're going to go through these boards. I'm not worried so much right now about the exact ellipse that these different things will be making, but I want to make sure I have a good idea of where each of them will be connecting with the shelf. So these, I'm trying to line all these up in a straight line. I'm not sure how successful I was. And to make sure that these points are on this center horizontal midline that I have figured out. And that's going to help me place these pipes in a fairly accurate way. I will sketch just sort of the basic idea of where the line that I think they're going to go. And this is a fun thing just in itself, because this idea of overlap, where you can stop seeing something and where you can start seeing something, is another great cue to create depth and dimensionality. One doesn't seem to be lining up, and it makes me wonder if this edge is a little bit too far that way. I will consider that. Similar for that one. That seems decent. I think I want to, I'm sort of thinking about how I make these thicker. I could certainly just go on each side of these. I think I want that to sort of represent the furthest left side of each of these poles. I will talk about what the appearance will be when it meets up with the shelf. But just real briefly, it will be an ellipse. Seems like now this makes, I'm not sure. No, I didn't like that. Pretend I didn't do it that way. I'm just sort of trying to judge that there's the same distance here as here, and actually, if you're going to when you get really involved with the crisscross lines, you can use those to help figure that kind of stuff out. For now, I think I'm going to go a little bit to the side, on either side of my original guideline. It's getting kind of sloppy, but that's what we have kneaded erasers for. So I am going to pause there and clean up these and talk more about doing more.